Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Kelly. I'm from Healthy Cities Illawarra. So welcome to our first Friday forum. There's still people coming through the meeting room and the waiting room. So if you hear little buzzes, that's me letting people in. So first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting on today. And I'm from Dharawal country, so we acknowledge the custodianship of country of the people and pay our respects to any Aboriginal people that are joining us today, and to elders past, present and emerging. Just doing some more admitting. So this week obviously is National Science Week, and I just wanted to make that point because this session is going to be a little bit of a science lesson for us all, a little bit of a refresher of our biology lessons in high school, just to reset and reframe this awful pandemic that we're going through and just get some really evidence-based, truthful, scientific information on our immune systems. So it's not medical advice, so we'll make that clear. And just in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, just in order to keep to time and to keep the focus on our speakers, we'll make sure that everyone is on mute and their cameras are off. So just use the chat function to ask questions. I'll introduce our speakers who will speak for about 30 minutes. And then I'll direct a Q&A. So first of all, the amazing medical scientists that have donated their time for us this afternoon, both from the School of Medicine at the University of Wollongong. We have Dr. Kath Weston, who's an Associate Professor in Public Health, and Dr. Teresa Larkin, who's a Senior Lecturer in Medical Sciences. So I'll just admit a few more people. Yeah, and so I'm going to get my camera off and hand over to Kath, I believe is starting.
I will just share my screen.
Thanks very much, Kelly, and thanks everyone for joining in this session that Teresa and I are presenting to you. We're talking today about understanding the immune response, viruses and vaccines, and obviously this is a massive topic, so we've picked out some components of it to focus on today. But, you know, of course, we'll be welcoming any questions that you might have to probe questions and topics that you might want some more information about. So if we just, I'll get Teresa to drive the slides for me. And so if we just look at the first one, thanks, Teresa.
Kath, is this on the full screen or is it in presenter mode?
I can see the full screen.
Full screen? Okay, perfect. Sorry, it's just flicking between my screens here. Yep.
Yep, good for me.
Oh.
Yep, so go to the next slide if you could. Okay, so we're talking mostly about viruses today. And of course, there's lots of different what we call germs or infectious agents or pathogens that cause disease. But viruses have been around for many, many, many years. And this ancient picture from ancient Egypt shows a person, Pharaoh, with a withered leg, so that his right leg is much thinner from, you know, compared to his other leg, and this is taken as a sign of polio. And we know that the polio virus attacks the muscles and can cause, in some cases, disability. In terms of the physical use of the muscles in the arm or the leg and so on. This next picture is a picture of someone who is suffering from smallpox, which is another viral disease. And you can see this, the picture on the left is the mummified what's left of the Pharaoh Ramesses V, who is believed to have died of smallpox, and they can tell that by the lesions that are left on the mummified body. Are you changing this? Yeah, okay. So I think the thing about smallpox to remember is it's another viral disease, caused massive amounts of death in the past, and we're in the very happy position now of having eradicated or annihilated that disease forever. Thanks, Teresa. And so here we've got an image that shows the impact of various diseases, some bacterial, of course, like diphtheria and pneumococcal meningitis, but some viral diseases that caused untimely death. So Patricia Ann Ivermy, aged 15 months, died of measles. Mary Roche, aged 4 years of age, died of measles. And Lily Griggs, aged 21 months, died of influenza. And Lily there in 1919, that was part of what we call, wrongly, but the Spanish flu. So, and the other ones, measles was a known disease for many years, but there was no vaccine in 1928 or 1942 when those little ones succumbed to it. So viruses are quite serious illnesses. And so that's part of the discussion today about the impact of viruses, how they are transmitted and what we can do about them. Thanks, Teresa. Here we've got a whole lot of people who have been affected by the virus polio that I mentioned before. And as I said, the polio virus affects muscles. And for these people, it affected their lungs to the point where they could not breathe themselves. And so a machine called an iron lung was developed that actually did the breathing for the people who were affected by the virus in that way. And some people spent many years in the iron lung because there was no other way to allow them to breathe. So you can see the impact on a person themselves, but on the whole community and the population when these diseases like smallpox and polio and influenza are transmitted through the population. Thanks, Teresa. So then, what is a virus? I mean, you know, what do we think of when we think of a virus? And we've heard of polio virus and measles virus and so on. It basically is a very small agent that can cause disease. And what we've got here is something that really looks like Christmas decorations, but in actual fact, it shows you that the structure of viruses differs between viruses. And if you look at these viruses, you can see that each one of them, maybe less with the Ebola, but the HIV and the influenza and the rabies virus and measles virus, they've all got little protrusions or bits sticking out of the surface. And that's what we call antigens. So it's important that we remember that word antigen because that's what our antibodies are designed to stick onto and cause to get rid of the virus. And with COVID-19, you've probably all heard of the spike protein, and that basically is the antigen on the surface of the COVID-19 virus. So it's important that we understand these antigens that are on the surface are different for the different viruses, which is why we have different vaccines against different viruses and why our immune system is able to recognize the measles virus. It's able to recognize the rotavirus in specific ways. So we're very clever in our immune system that we can specifically recognize individual viruses, not just one response. Thanks, Teresa. So if you look at a virus, and one of the really interesting things about viruses is how tiny they are. So a bacteria like E. coli you might have heard of that lives in your stomach, or a bacterium like Streptococcus, which causes infections. And you can see how big they are. On this screen, they're enormous. But in comparison to a virus, they're way, way bigger. So it took a long time for us to discover what viruses were because we couldn't see them down the microscope, for instance. We had to find them by filtering them to the point where bacteria got out, were filtered out, but these viruses were still able to cause disease, and that's how we discovered what they were. But that was not so long ago, really, even in the 1930s. So viruses, they're all different shapes, they have all different functions, they infect in different ways, and they have different degrees of how important, serious, lethal they are. Thanks, Teresa. So some of them are deadly. So some like influenza, during a typical influenza season or the flu season, up to 500,000 people will die worldwide. And the Spanish flu, as I mentioned before, was a global pandemic like we're experiencing now, started in 1918, didn't get to Australia till about January 1919, but it infected up to 40% of the world's population. And it's estimated that 50 million people died. So we can't take viruses, you know, without taking them seriously. We have to recognize the impact that they have on populations as well as on individuals. Thanks, Teresa. And another deadly one is Ebola, which is now just recently had a resurgence in a couple of places in Africa. And it was first discovered in 1976. And one of the interesting things about viruses and scientists is that scientists are discovering about 2 new viruses on average every year. So we are only just still learning what's out there and what potential we have for viruses to make an impact on us as people, also on agricultural industry and so on. So some of the Ebola strains are quite mild, but others have a fatality rate, that means how many people die, of up to 50%, and even one strain up to 75%. That means out of 100 people who get that strain, 75 people will die. This is a terrible disease, and it's a terrible disease that's affecting people in developing countries. Thanks, Teresa. And other viruses are just annoying, like the common cold virus. We know, it makes you feel really rotten. Everyone in the family gets it. Kids bring it home from preschool. Causes about 10 to 40% of common cold illnesses. And you get about 6 or 7 colds every winter. So some of them just are really, really annoying. Thanks, Teresa. But the range of impact of viruses is vast. And what I've got here is a list of some of the different conditions, diseases, symptoms that can be caused by the different viruses that we know about. So for instance, if we talk about pneumonia, we know that the COVID-19 virus can cause pneumonia. We know that the influenza virus can cause pneumonia. Sexually transmitted disease, we know the HIV virus can cause sexually transmitted disease. Cancer, we know that 2 particular viruses, the hepatitis B virus that can cause liver cancer, and the HPV virus, or the human papilloma virus, which we know is associated with cervical cancer. And that's why it's so important during the teenage immunisation program at school that boys and girls get the HPV vaccine. Other viruses cause rashes, some even cause warts, and that's pretty disgusting. So viruses can cause all these different, and even the rubella virus, we know that a pregnant woman who catches the rubella virus who isn't vaccinated or isn't immune, that can be serious outcomes for the developing baby. Let's see what's next. So the next question then is, how do viruses infect your body? And this is a great slide showing every time you sneeze, people think it's funny to sneeze on people, but not anymore. We know how easy it is to transmit viruses through speaking, through coughing, and through sneezing. Thanks, Teresa. So it depends on the virus, how you catch it. So you can have person-to-person contact, you can have aerosols, the picture that you showed before. Some food or water contamination can cause virus infections, and that's particularly like if you travel to some developing countries and you aren't vaccinated against hepatitis A. If the sewage system isn't very good there, if you drink the water, you can get hepatitis A virus that way and really wreck your holiday. Some viruses are transmitted via insect bites, and you might have heard of Ross River virus. That's one that's transmitted by insect bites. And animal carriers. And the little picture here is a microbat, a little tiny bat about the size of your thumb or a bit bigger. And those have been associated with transmitting something in Australia called Australian bat lyssavirus. And lyssavirus is like a cousin of rabies. So it's a very, very serious illness. If you come across a bat stuck in a barbed wire fence or in your house, you've got to call someone to get rid of it. Don't try and get rid of it yourself. So it depends on the virus. You can also catch it by licking a pig. And this is just to break up the talk so that to keep us back on track, that this was a picture that during the swine flu time in 2009 that people working in public health looked at just to bring us back to normal, that we can do things about. We can find things amusing even in the darkest circumstances that we find ourselves in. So the next question I know you're asking is, what happens once a virus is in your body? And the thing we have to go back and remember the word that I talked about before, which is antigens. And in the COVID-19 case, what we call the spike protein. So the virus that I've got drawn here, which you can see, Teresa might use the cursor to help me the word virus, it has the little blue dots on its surface, which we'll call as antigens, right? Now, on the cell, and it can be whatever cell is being targeted, in the case of COVID-19, lots of the cells have these particular receptors that are like docking stations, if you like, and they're in a shape that kind of fits really well the antigen. The whole point about the virus is that it can find a way to get inside the cell. So the virus sticks onto the docking station and then goes inside the cell. And it uses all your own machinery in the cell to make more of itself. So if you think that someone comes into your house, trashes your house, uses all your kitchen equipment, wrecks everything inside your house with the aim of making lots more of itself, so they've gone into your house, cloned themselves, and then burnt down your house, that's kind of what happens with a virus. Goes in, uses your machinery, your DNA, all your good stuff to make more of itself, kills your cell, and then comes out. So what we have then is a cycle where the virus infects the cell, makes more of itself, and then spreads around your body, infecting more cells, making more of itself, more cells, more of itself. And so you end up with this roaring viral infection. So that's what happens when a virus gets into your body. So with that, we kind of don't want it to get into our body, do we? We've got to try and think logically, how can we prevent the virus from getting in? How can we prevent a disease? And so it all depends on, again, the virus and its characteristics. So some that are aerosol viruses or that you get from coughing or sneezing, if you wear a mask or you cough into your elbow, you're doing a massive amount to reduce the spread of that virus. And we've seen that even in the last 2 years of COVID, that the number of cases of influenza have gone down because people are doing more of this, protecting themselves from actually getting the virus, the flu virus inside them, because they're trying to stop themselves getting the COVID. For some, I'll just go back, Teresa, a bit. For some diseases like mosquito-borne diseases, you've got to do things like fly screens. You've got to get rid of water that's lying around where the mosquitoes breed. So you've got to understand the way that the virus works. For sexually transmitted diseases, you need to be looking at safe sex procedures, wearing condoms and so on. And for just about everything, wash your hands. This next slide, also another thing to keep ourselves recognising that we will get back to normal and we can have jokes at some point, is physical distancing. And we know that the further we stay away from someone, the less likely it is that the virus can travel that far to get into you. And they're particularly the airborne transmissible viruses from coughing and sneezing. So which is why we talk about 1 metre or 2 metres apart. And finally, and really, really importantly, we are wonderfully beneficial people, that we have had fantastic scientists who have developed vaccines for us. And what the vaccine does is actually stops you getting the disease. You might get the virus inside you, but the disease won't happen. And so we know that vaccines save 2 to 3 million lives each year. We know that flu vaccine works. HPV vaccine works to stop cervical cancer. So vaccines are massively important as an enormous part of this fight against viruses. And so obviously you're now asking, well, how do vaccines work, Kath and Teresa? And I think it's important that we do a little bit of biology again. Let's understand a bit more of the immune system. And I'm handing over to Teresa.
Thanks, Kat. So, sorry, people, I just had forgotten that it comes up on my big screen over there at work. So firstly, our immune system, it's really our defense system. So there are 2 main things that it does, and that's protect us from pathogens. So those germs, we can say in general, that Kath's been talking about. So that word pathogen just means generation of something pathological, and also even from our own dead, dying or cancer cells. So this is an image of a cancer cell. So our immune system will protect us from pathogens. It'll try and get rid of germs, but it will also get rid of our dead and damaged cells and try not to have cancer cells proliferate. So on the front line, we have physical barriers. So that's our skin, the linings in our nose, mouth, our respiratory tract, our digestive tract, because essentially they're all open to the air. So we still think of those as external surfaces. And if something then gets through those physical barriers, so through the linings of those, then we've got our internal immune system that has that real important function. So you can think of many examples when something gets through a physical barrier that's not meant to. Even when you graze yourself, you fall over, there's an animal bite. We've all experienced things like that in cuts, where then we will have an immune response internally because we've got all of those systems inside us that can spring into action. So on this slide, I thought interesting to point out to you that, so tears have some of those important immune cells for fighting off infections. And then we've got our things like, throughout our respiratory tract, obviously our tonsils are important. People would know of those for an immune response. And then our lymph nodes that are in different areas. And things like our bone marrow is super important because that's where we have production of our important immune cells. So I thought I'd just start with going over something that people would know or have experience with. So when we think about our immune system in general, we've also got ways that can be dysregulated. So if we had an over-responsive or a hypersensitive immune response, that's in the case of allergies. So an allergy is where our immune system is responding to something that's not actually going to damage us, but it thinks that the bit of pollen in the air or something that you've eaten, it thinks that that's something dangerous. So it considers it as a germ, and then the immune system will go into action to try and get rid of that. So it's not the it's not the pollen or the allergen that's causing problems there. It's actually the immune response. If we have an under response, an immune deficiency, that's the exact case with HIV and leading into AIDS. And so people with HIV and AIDS are really at risk of infections because the HIV virus is actually destroying their immune cells. So they can't even mount an infection to something that we would all be totally fine with. Then there can be a wrong response, and that's a case of the autoimmune diseases. This is where our immune system recognizes something that is our own, some of our own tissue, whether that's the kidney or the thyroid gland or something in the gastrointestinal tract, the digestive tract. And maybe our immune cells have seen a virus in the past and it's set up a response to get rid of that virus or germ. But then when it sees some of our own tissues, it thinks that they look quite similar. So it starts to set up an attack on our own tissues. So autoimmune diseases are where the immune system, we can say, is misdirected. So we're fighting our own tissues because they've been mistaken for something that's not meant to be there. When we think about our immune system, I'll go through this bit first and then we'll get through to the main part that's really relevant for viruses and vaccination. So the first thing that our immune system does, so I'm going to use this one. So here we have a virus again, and this is an important immune cell. Some immune cells actually digest that virus or the germ. I'll just say germs because then that can be a virus or a bacteria or anything. So those immune cells can actually engulf the germ and take it inside to them, into their cell, and kill them. So this is a way that the immune system directly will attack germs. The second way is that once a germ gets into one of our own cells, what it does is that it puts a little signal on the outside of that cell. So it tags that cell to say, I'm a germ and I'm inside this cell, because the body needs to know that that cell now is being damaged. The virus or the germ is inside, it might be playing havoc, as Kath mentioned, might be ruining the DNA. So the tag goes to the outside of one of our cells. So then there are other immune cells that are on the lookout for that. So as soon as they see one of our cells with a tag that says there's a germ inside, then some immune cells, their function is to kill those cells. What this initial response is all about is an inflammatory response. So this is a rapid, non-specific response. Whenever you've grazed yourself, anything's gone in, irritated into your blood, whatever, then there's going to be this initial general inflammatory response because the body wants to just have a quick response. Everyone would have experienced inflammation, and that's an early sign of some kind of an infection, even a minor infection that the body can just deal with. And those signs are, as we know, so redness, warmth, pain, and some swelling. What happens is that those cells at the site release these messages called cytokines that really keep that inflammation going. And they're important because they're bringing other cells to that site to try and fight and contain the germs. But the problem, and you might have heard of this with COVID, where there can be what's called a cytokine storm, is that sometimes it's the overproduction of those inflammatory cells that leads to damage. So in the lungs, for example, with COVID, these cytokines are sending out messages, they're increasing inflammation, they're bringing in other immune cells to fight, but they actually can cause a blockage. So they're there to contain, and they can block the airways and block and affect our breathing. So sometimes the inflammatory response is quite damaging. So once the body's had that initial general response to whatever it is, what happens next is what we call a targeted response. And this is all about antibodies. So I looked up previously what antibodies, the derivation of that word, and originally they were called antitoxic bodies. So they're body structures in our body that are against toxins. But antibodies is an important word that we'll use. So these are really associated with one lot of our white blood cells called B cells. So our B cells secrete antibodies. You might have also heard of them being called immunoglobulins. So these are examples of B cells. So they're immune cells, white blood cells, they're made in the bone marrow, and they've all got these antibodies. So they're very good. They're going to kill all our germs, sticking out from the edges of them. So in these cases, they're attached to those cells. You can see on this picture, the different colors are showing that we've got antibodies to cover everything. So we've got antibodies that have got, like B cells have got all different kinds of antibodies, so that, for example, this particular B cell, those antibodies are ready to fight off that particular germ. These ones are ready to fight off that particular germ. So that little diamond fits into that diamond shape. So it's pretty amazing that in our bodies, we've just got populations of all different kinds of B cells with all different kinds of antibodies. What these B cells also do is actually shed or secrete, we can say, the antibodies into the plasma so that they can travel and go to where they're needed. Because obviously if there's an infection far from where these are produced, we need the antibodies to get there. The key in terms of vaccination is that these antibodies have a specific response. These particular ones are only going to respond to that germ, which is good. We don't want everything responding to everything. And they also have a memory so that the next time they see that particular germ, they can have an even bigger response. So this slide is just showing us that this, for example, is a B cell, and these are the antibodies, and that's going to respond to that particular germ. When a particular antibody sees the germ that it's targeted to get rid of, so it will target it and mop it up and get rid of it from the body, what happens when it sees that is that sets off a cascade. And so one B cell is then going to divide into many, many B cells because we need a huge coordinated response. The good thing though is that some of those are going to go and do their work, but some others are going to go on to become memory cells. And they're going to go and sit in our spleen, so in one of the organs in our abdominal cavity, and just wait there for in case we come across that same germ again. So I'll explain then how that happens and why this is really important. So I've got numbers here that match up across these two diagrams. So this number one here is showing us that these are B cells with antibodies sticking out from their side, and they've seen some germs. So this particular antibody and B cell, they're responding to those germs. They start to multiply. This is good because we need a response in the body. We need lots of those fighters to go and pick up all the germs that are circulating in the body. This picture over here, this is showing us the levels of those antibodies in our blood. So we can see here, we don't have any of those levels of those antibodies in our blood because, say, for example, we've never seen this germ before. You've traveled to a different country and you've come into contact with a different germ. But you've got the antibodies and the B cells that are ready to come and find that and get rid of it. So then they start to multiply, which we've seen. So you can see, we'll follow this dark line, you can see the levels of those antibodies increasing and increasing in our blood. That's good. And that's probably enough to get rid of that infection. But sometimes it mightn't be. What happens is that some of these cells here, they become the memory cells that wait in the spleen for the next time we see that same germ. So here you can see now we've had the germ again. And so we're starting over here. We've already got some of those memory cells and some of those antibodies in our blood. They multiply and multiply and multiply super quickly because they're used to that response. They're primed and they're ready to react. So what happens is that, again, looking up here at the antibody levels in our blood, and that's what you can test for to see if you've got a response to a vaccination, for example, they go up super, super fast. So they go up really quickly and really high. So any second time that we see that same germ, we have a really stronger and more beneficial response. Just lastly, how our immune system develops before we move on to about vaccines. So we actually have a general immune system before birth. So we have that ability to react with inflammation in general before we're even born. But we don't really have antibodies until the last 3 months of being in utero. So they're transferred from the mother via the placenta. It's something that's an issue if a baby is born prematurely before that 3-month time, but then also through the breast milk. So that's why the World Health Organization does recommend breastfeeding for a certain amount of time, because that's then delivery of those important antibodies to the baby. The problem is, though, as the breastfeeding reduces, babies are quite susceptible to infections because they don't have a fully developed immune system. The way we get that is through germ exposure throughout our life. So each time we're exposed to a germ, we develop antibodies. So up until the age of 2 or so, a baby's immune system isn't fully functional, but as we develop and as they play in the dirt, all those things that are important for them, get exposed to multiple people, then that's how we can develop a healthy immune system. On to you, Kat.
Thank you, Teresa. Lovely explanations, and we'll revisit some of Teresa's graphs as well. So I just want to go back now to vaccines, and I wonder if any of you recognise this gentleman whose name is Ali Malin. Now, the important thing about this man is that he is the last known person to ever have smallpox. He's the last person to have been identified as having the disease smallpox. When he was identified, it was part of the World Health Organization program to eradicate smallpox. They found all the people who were his contacts, they gave them all vaccine, they put a ring fence around that cluster of people, and then it was gone. All those people were better. We had smallpox no longer, because smallpox can't live in the soil, can't live in trees. It only lives if it's in a person. So if you've got no people with it, no smallpox. This is our aim. This is our aim for many viral diseases that are only in humans, that we can actually get rid of. We don't vaccinate against smallpox anymore because it's not a problem. So this is our aim of vaccination. We can do fantastic scientific things to actually change the threats that exist. Thanks, Teresa. So as Teresa said, the goal of vaccination is to produce memory. So we'll go back to this slide, and we've seen it before. We're looking at the levels of antibody on the y-axis, and we're looking at what happens when you get exposed to antigen. So if you're unvaccinated, as Teresa said, you start right at the bottom. You've got to go through this process that can take several weeks to get enough antibodies to do the job. Now, if it's a really serious illness, you might not survive. Those 3 weeks that it takes, or 2 weeks to get, neutralizing antibodies or antibodies that are effective, it might not, that's too long. You might have died. Or you might have got better. We don't know, but we have to make sure that we prepare for that. But if you're vaccinated, when you actually see the virus at that point Teresa's pointing to, you've already got memory antibodies. You've got antibodies circulating in your blood. And the time it takes to get even more, as Teresa said, is only a short period, for much shorter than for someone who's unvaccinated. You end up with very high levels of antibodies because those memory cells have been switched on, and you don't even know sometimes you've had the disease. Thanks, Teresa. So you make more quickly. So what does it all mean? Basically, your immune system memory, those protective antibodies that can be switched on at an instant, make your response, if you've been vaccinated, faster, better, stronger, more antibodies, more cells than if you have no vaccine, if you've had no protection. So vaccine gets us to that point where we've got a really good chance of fighting that disease we mightn't even know we've caught. And if we use COVID, and remember, we go back to some of those things we've talked about antigens on the surface, about the docking station receptor. if you look at the virus, the COVID virus as an example, we've got the antigens on the surface sticking on the docking station on the cell and going in and causing an infection. That's what happens. We know that's what's happening to all the people who've got COVID. All the cells that have that docking station, they're all going to be infected, and it's a terrible disease. But, next slide. Oh, one more, back. If we've made antibodies through vaccination, those antibodies are going to block, they're going to stick onto those antigens, onto the spike proteins, onto those bumps on the surface. And when they stick onto them, because the vaccine we've been given specifically is antibodies against that spike protein, it can't get on the cell. It can't dock because we've got a massive, great big antibody sticking on it. And then your immune system can come and mop it up, and then you're better. So, or even you don't even know you've had it. So that's the point of vaccination here. The antibodies against the spike protein stick onto the virus, don't let the virus get in the cell. The rest of your immune system clears it away, and that's how you're protected. That's how vaccination will protect you against COVID-19 and other viruses as well. And you can see here the childhood immunisation schedule, which changes from time to time, but basically we're looking at a range of bacteria that we know about and a range of viruses that we know about that we've been successful in making good vaccines against. And you can see here hepatitis B virus, polio virus, rotavirus, measles, mumps, rubella virus, chickenpox virus. We now have those in our childhood schedule so that the children already are at the point where if they come across that virus, they can fight it really easily. They don't get sick. And it is important that we look and understand that all things that we do in life do involve risks. And one of the vaccines, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, people asked about the risk of that. And they compared it in this slide here, which is from a wonderful website, historyofvaccines.org, from the National Public Radio, I think, in America. But 139 motor vehicle deaths per million people, 99 unintentional poisoning deaths per million people, and a serious allergic reaction, not even a death. We're talking about some quite serious, but not something that we can manage per million people, less than one. So we have to understand all things that we do. We need to understand our risk. We need to take responsibility, do the best science exploration, looking at trying to understand things. Because if you go to the next slide, we do.
That was for the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, wasn't it, Kath?
Absolutely. Only this is it's just as an example of why we all need to understand what we do. I've had 2 hip replacements myself. I had to look at the risks, look at the benefits, and that's what we do. Measles itself is a horrible disease. Many people who will get it now will need hospitalisation. There's risk of deafness. There's risk of encephalitis, which is a brain inflammation. So that actual disease is awful. But the vaccine has nothing of those risks, not that risk of encephalitis or that risk of deafness. So we have to really understand the science and why vaccination is one of the most wonderful scientific advances that we've got and is the reason why we are able to live long and healthy lives. But it is a community responsibility. It is a responsibility for ourselves, but also a responsibility that we have for all the rest of the community. And we want to get to that point here where that little boy with measles we never see again. In Australia, we don't have circulating measles. It only ever comes in from overseas. We're that good with our vaccines against measles. We want to get to the point where we can get rid of people's disease from polio. And that number 3 there's only 3 countries left in the world that have polio. So we're so close. This is our aim of vaccination. And so I think if we stop there, we might have some questions, but I think we also need to recognise that the contact tracers and the people who help understand how the disease is spreading are a vital part of our health workforce as well.
Thanks, Kath. Thanks, Teresa. We've got a couple of questions that have come through, but thank you so much for a very detailed yet understandable way of kind of having a really good science lesson again. So for those people who might be a little bit touchy about getting needles themselves, so the actual needle, so why does a vaccination have to be injected as opposed to a liquid or other forms of getting something into your body?
So when most vaccines are injected into muscle, And that's like a lot of substances. So anyone who's been through fertility treatment, that's injections into muscles. A lot of strong painkillers in hospital are injected into muscle. The reason that muscle is a good site for injection of things like that, especially things that are bigger, is that it has a really good blood supply. It also has immune cells there that are ready to respond, and then they have a really quick path to the closest lymph nodes to sort of continue that development of the immune cells. We can't give a vaccine, or I mean, there are certain cases, but in general, you know, it's difficult to give a vaccine through the oral route, because then that's going to be in contact with those external surfaces that actually are set up to fight, you know, some of those immune responses, and anything that we ingest orally has to go through the liver. It's sort of quite a long path. And other injections, you know, we can have injections into the fat, such as insulin. That's just a bit more of a slow uptake. It's usually less irritating to inject something into the muscle. You know, we get a very localized response, but into fat can be quite irritating. And then if we think about even an injection into the muscle really isn't as dangerous as getting an injection into the veins or having blood taken even, because that's going straight into the circulatory system. So we have our injections of vaccinations into muscle just because it's a big enough site to have some storage of that volume, a good uptake into blood, and that's where some of the immune cells are.
Great, good, thank you. There's a question about does the vaccinations carry the virus? So is that how the vaccination grows, the antibodies?
It doesn't, but Kathia, you're on mute if you want to answer that.
Absolutely not in the terms of the COVID vaccine. So there are some vaccines that carry a damaged form of the virus, like the measles one, and the reason that vaccine is so good, because that damaged virus can live for a little bit of time, and you get a really good chance to make both the first and the second level of response that Teresa talked to you about. But basically, when we're talking about most vaccines, they don't contain the virus. They contain something that either is the protein or the antigen, or something that makes the protein or the antigen. But vaccines themselves cannot cause disease in that way, because they're not a live functioning organism like the viruses I've been describing.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, guys. There's a question around children. So and they've said great presentation, thank you. Is the response within the body different for children? And we know that the COVID vaccinations aren't approved for kids under 16 yet, so maybe just a comment about that.
So as Teresa mentioned, if it's okay if I jump in, Teresa, that little babies, it takes them a little while to get to a sort of fully functional immune system, maybe about 2 years. But we're talking about vaccinations for children against COVID, and they're talking about when are we going to get them for children, you know, age 12 or 12 to 16 and so on. So some countries around the world are vaccinating against children, against COVID, vaccinating children against COVID, right? But we are our ATAGI, which is the group of scientists and doctors, we're waiting to find all of the data to see what we need to do to vaccinate children, whether we need 2 doses, the size of the dose, the distance between, or the time between doses. So at the moment in Australia, we have not approved the vaccine for use in children. Now, we've approved lots of other vaccines, as I showed you in the schedule, measles, mumps, rubella, whooping cough, diphtheria, so on, because we've looked at the science, we've looked at the results, and we know the best outcome and the best doses and so on. But COVID, the scientists are just waiting until we see what's going on in countries that started well before us to vaccinate children. And with that in mind, while we're unable to vaccinate children at this time, that's why it's doubly important or triply important that anyone around children gets vaccinated, because if the children are good transmitters, if the parents are vaccinated, if the teachers are vaccinated, if the football coaches and netball coaches are vaccinated, if the carers are vaccinated, it just reduces the capacity of the virus to be spread far and wide, because we haven't got to the point of knowing exactly the best way to vaccinate children. And that will take some time. It's being looked at by the scientists in terms of when, how, what's the best dose and so on.
Thanks, Kath.
Did you want me to answer that other question that Craig's got on the the line there? I can see one on the chat about a testing solution.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought of it myself, but I guess just to point out that when you're testing to see if someone has had their virus or is it their vaccine's been effective, we really need to look at antibodies, and so they're only in our blood and in some of our other secretions. So we can use saliva, we can use blood, you know, some of those quick testing, but something on the skin or a patch isn't really, I mean, obviously I'm not a person who's looking down that path technologically, but from the science side of it, we need tissue. So we need blood or we need saliva. So I don't, you know, I guess it would just be advances in the technologies for how quick we can, you know, have something where you can pop something in and it does change color. But at the end of the day, it will still, you know, require some kind of a body fluid and a chemical reaction.
And some of the rapid tests, if I just add on to that, that can be done in a short period of time. You might do a swab, but they're looking not at the antibodies, they're looking for bits of virus. They're looking for something that shows them that the virus is there or has been there, and it might be a bit of DNA or nuclear material from the virus, or it might be, you know, something on the outside of the virus, again, an antigen that we're picking up with, a sort of antibody that's used in a test. So we can, there are some rapid tests that are being used overseas, and they're quite helpful for people who, you know, just want to make sure that they aren't carrying the virus, even though it's like everything, nothing's 100%, you know, sure, but those people, then if we, you know, those people who are negative, it's much less likely that they're going to transmit something, even if it's starting to be there.
Mm. And Michelle had a couple of interesting questions. One is about if people can boost their immunity by maybe taking vitamins, C, D, zinc. Does that produce any extra COVID antibodies? And the second question she had was if we can have a blood test that identifies if we have COVID antibodies.
So at this point, there isn't a blood test because the tests that we've got are testing for the actual virus. So they're testing for the virus. The first point about vitamins and so on, look, the most important thing is you can be as healthy as possible. And that also includes your mental health. But there's no evidence that supplementing yourself with vitamins and so on is going to help in any way. Because most of us are healthy enough anyway. Mostly you don't need supplementation because your body is already getting enough from whatever your normal life eating habits and whatever is what your life is. So I wouldn't think that, and the evidence is that's not going to help you boost your immunity against COVID in a way that you should say you don't get vaccinated, for instance. So it's all great to be healthy and do whatever you can to be as healthy that works for you, but not to try and think that that's going to make a difference in terms of not needing vaccine.
Mm. And this is a nice follow-on from that. There's a question around why some vaccines last for years and you only need it once, and then others like the flu shot you might, you know, need annually, or like, and I think I used the word booster as well. Like, so yeah, what's the difference between long-term and short-term kind of vaccines?
Sorry to jump in again here, if that's
no,
okay, Lisa. So look, there's actually quite a range of vaccine technologies that we use, and we use them depending on the way that our immune system interacts with the vaccine. So some vaccines, like I said, with the measles one, which is the virus is so damaged it can't really do anything, but it lasts long enough in your body to give you a really good long-term immune response. So most people are immune for life, even after one, but after 2 vaccine doses. That immunity is so good and so long-lasting because of the type of vaccine it is. Other ones, you need to have boosters because immunity wanes. It just, over our lifetime, it just wanes and gets lower and lower. So if we've recognised that for particular diseases like whooping cough, we now give a teenage booster because the immunity just wanes, and that will help. With the flu, it's slightly different because the flu virus changes every year. So we need to keep on having the vaccine that is developed to respond to the changes of the virus that happen every year. And we're talking again about the antigens on the surface and the structures on the surface that we make antibodies against. The flu virus is very smart and it changes those, but we know how to make vaccine that we can anticipate what is going to be happening and what we need to put in those vaccines every year. But I'll just quickly say one more thing about COVID vaccines. It's not impossible that we will need boosters of those. So we need our 2-shot regime or whatever vaccine we're getting. But it may well be that there'll be variants, slight changes to the COVID virus. That means that a booster might be needed, or the immunity might wane somewhat over, I don't know how long, years, whatever, that we need to have boosters. So it is hugely important that we continue to develop our vaccine technology to be able to provide us with boosters if we find that the immunity is waning or the virus changes in such a way that we need to help our immune system along.
Thanks, Kath. There's one around the hesitancy of vaccinating young adults without any known long-term effects, and if you had any comment on that.
Without any
long-term effects. It's not clear if that's about the vaccine or COVID itself, but vaccination amongst young adults without knowing long-term effects.
Look, I think it's vaccination about anyone. We have to be looking at who's vulnerable, and of course, elderly people with chronic diseases are vulnerable. But it's not, doesn't mean that someone who's younger isn't going to have a bad reaction to catching COVID and be in a hospital because of that. So I think it's one of those things that I understand, and I really respect that people who feel really healthy can't see why they would want to get a vaccine. And I really understand that. But the risks and benefits of disease mean to me and to scientists and people who've looked at it that we have to not give ourselves the risk of getting the disease. And so for something like COVID, we need to try and get rid of it. We need to stop it being transmitted through the community. And the only way we can do that at this time is to have our vaccination rates really high. But I do understand that, but at this point in time, we have to keep people as healthy as we can.
And there's one last one, and I'll just remind everyone, we'll make a version of this on our website probably early next week for anyone who wants to refresh. And this kind of goes to the risk discussion and the risk of blood clots. So what's the deal with the blood clot commentary?
Yeah, I can answer that. And I was also going to say, when Kath was just talking about the risks, the measles, mumps, rubella, it was less than 1 in a million of deaths and cases with that. And that would have had to have, started off in young people at some stage. So I guess it's that thing that, we can only continue doing those processes with as good science as we can. Yeah, in terms of the blood clots, and again, I'm sure people have seen this on the news and everything, in terms of the actual incidence of those, compared to other diseases that cause blood clots, and also to COVID disease itself, which has a huge risk of blood clots. So what a blood clot is when, instead of having, in our blood, we've got lots of blood cells, including the white immune blood cells, but also our red blood cells, we want that to be traveling nice through our vessels. Anytime that there's a clumping of some cells, so if there's a genetic predisposition to clumping, or if we have things like, there's lots of risk factors for blood clots, so smoking, pregnancy, cancer, diabetes, lots of, even being physically inactive and staying still. What happens is, when we have reduced blood flow, there's more chance that some of the blood cells will stop and stick. So that it's called a thrombus, when we have a collection of blood cells that are stuck in a vessel. The risk with that is that within that vessel itself, it might block the vessel and cause problems with blood flow. And that might be in a leg, and it might cause pain and some, discomfort, but it's not going to kill us in that moment. But the risk with blood clots is when a small little bit of that whole collection comes off, travels, and ends up somewhere else, like in the brain or in the lungs. So the blood clot risk with the AstraZeneca virus, or with any of the vaccine, is there, but it is very low compared to even pregnancy and taking the pill. The reason why pregnancy and taking the pill increase our chances of blood clotting is that actually in pregnancy, it's a protective thing, because the body knows that there's a risk of hemorrhage with giving birth, and blood clotting is a very important process because it prevents our risk of bleeding out. And we all have had that, you know, we cut ourselves, we'll have bleeding and then it will stop because the blood's clumped together and clotted really nicely. So I guess just thinking about, you know, there are risks with all those things. Actually, one of my friends who's a surgeon has been concerned about the increase in blood clots in the lungs that she's seen to do with COVID from people being physically inactive. So we know that there's an increased risk with blood clots, you know, flying in an airplane or in bed rest after surgery. And that's why people will be injected with some of those blood thinners to try and prevent that. But essentially, if we're not moving and we're not pumping our muscles in our legs, it's like if we had something that was all mixed together. If we're thinking of the blood cells in our plasma, if we had a solution that we left on the bench where we'd mixed it all in, it would, you know, it would clump out. So when we're not moving, things like that, obviously not to that extreme. It's not like all our blood cells go to the bottom of our feet when we stand up. But, you know, when we're not moving, we can still have a risk of clotting in that area.
Mm. Thanks, Teresa. We've got two last questions, and we've probably got time just for these last two.
Sorry, Kelly, I just want to, can I just say one quick thing? So in terms of the risk with the AstraZeneca vaccine, Teresa, then isn't it that now that we understand that risk, if someone does go to hospital because they've got any symptoms, they know exactly what to test for. Don't they know to test for those cells that cause clotting and so on. So it's all like all science. The more you understand, the more we can be able to manage any of those situations. And I'll just go one back because it's really important that when you mentioned the measles vaccine before, and you said, you know, 1 in a million, it's actually only 1 in a million of an allergic reaction, a severe allergic reaction, not even 1 in a million deaths. So we're talking about very safe vaccines. The safety of vaccines is really, really important. And so we make sure that the analysis of all the studies and so on is done. Sorry, Kelly, please go.
No, absolutely. It's great. The physical response for Pfizer vaccine, it seems to be less severe than AstraZeneca. And the question is asking why that's so.
Yeah.
I think, look, people respond differently to different vaccines. And for some people, zero side effects. For other people, they felt tired for anywhere from hours to days. I mean, my only comment about that is that's usually a sign that it's working. So that's good. I know people who've had the Pfizer who felt like a bit washed out, and people who've had the AstraZeneca who've, felt washed out. So I think it's something that depends on the person, and there's not a really good reason for it at this point.
I also wonder, I haven't actually thought about this before, but because at the moment there's more younger people getting the Pfizer and more older people getting the AstraZeneca, we're also comparing across different age groups. So if we had AstraZeneca being given across all ages and Pfizer being given across all ages, we would have a better comparison. But maybe age and physical ability and underlying immune response is also a part of that. But as Kath said, the response when people have had sort of immune responses to either or, it's actually a good thing, because you know that you've got, because what you're seeing is that general inflammation. You're like the initial response, like, oh my goodness, we've got an immune response going on here, but then it settles down, and then that's great. You've got your memory cells that have been produced because of that hit.
Well, and I love that answer, Teresa, because what you're talking about is why science is so fantastic, because we can't just say, oh, this is what happened to one person, so it's going to happen to everyone. We can't say this has happened in, young people, so it's going to happen in old people. So that's the wonderful thing about science. We've got to really understand what we're comparing, and you can't compare apples and oranges. So we don't have a good answer for that question, but thanks, for bringing it up.
And the last question is around young women and the potential impact on fertility from the vaccine. Is there any basis for that concern?
No. I'll just tell you, that is one of the very, very sad examples of fake news. So I've looked into that, and it's quite a tragic thing that messages like this go on social media and cause so much concern. And that's where getting some good science, talking to your doctor, and talking to people who can look at the evidence in a way that can help you understand that the evidence is not there for that to happen.
Thanks, Kath. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our first Friday Forum. So we're going to try and make these monthly and have some really regular, topical, helpful issues to unravel. And it's been very refreshing to hear this sort of stuff and to feel your passion for science and have a break from the headlines and the politics of the awful situation that we're in at the moment. So thanks so much to Teresa and Kat for joining us, and for everyone else for taking out your lunch hour. And we'll see you again next month.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.